Convidamos para moderar essa mesa a professora doutora Maria Teresa Seixas Alves, professora associada, livre-docente, chefe do Departamento de Patologia da Universidade Federal de São Paulo.
Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank you for inviting me to participate in this meeting. Without further ado, I introduce you Dr. Roger Geiss from the University of Illinois. Dr. Geiss graduated in 1975 in Cornell Medical College. He specialized in cytopathology, clinical and anatomic pathology, with emphasis in pulmonary pathology. Please welcome and take 4 minutes for your presentation.
Obrigado, professora, and that's probably the extent of my Portuguese. I will try to speak fairly slowly, and I do want to thank everyone who has made me feel so welcome here in Pathology, particularly Professor Nielsen and Karina Chama, who made my preparations go as smoothly as they did. Now, I noticed before I came that the populations of Botucatu and Peoria are about the same, but Peoria looks a little bit different. We have a river and a bridge, not many hills. Unfortunately, this picture doesn't include our cathedral, which sits about here. So both cities have a beautiful cathedral. This is our medical school. And we have 2 teaching hospitals that are over here, but this is where our second year takes place. Our first year is at another campus. Our 3rd and 4th years are at in the hospitals. So our students do move around a bit much. We are one of 3 regional campuses of the University of Illinois. So we have regional campuses all over the state. And so getting away from the University of Illinois at Peoria logo to the logo of the conference, I wanted to talk a bit about instructional objectives in general and systemic pathology. This is my job. This is my other hat, the Group for Research in Pathology Education, which if anyone is interested in learning more about or joining, please see me after my talk. I have some material on it. And I've been chair of the Learning Objectives Committee for some 14 years now. And I don't think there's any way to start a talk on objectives without giving the objectives of the talk. And so these are the objectives of the presentation. The differences between competencies, goals, and objectives can be confusing. I wanted to mention the utility of instructional objectives in pathology, and in order to construct objectives, one must know at least something about educational theory, including the 3 domains of educational activity. And within education, there is cognitive activity, which is both a lower and higher order. And again, a principle needs to be kept in mind when speaking about instructional objectives. And then simply distinguishing between a well-constructed and a not well-constructed objective. In other words, how to write good objectives. And of course, the objective for everyone here is to only use well-constructed learning objectives in the future. So just to begin, in the U.S., I'm not sure if this has come to Brazil yet, but in the U.S., we have a move toward competency-based education. And the competencies are simply the things that a medical school graduate needs to possess in order to begin practicing medicine, in order to enter residency. The knowledge, skills, concepts, and attitudes. So this is a very broad category. Now goals, you can have goals of a curriculum, goals of a course, goals of a module, say in pulmonary, but they're just simply broad general statements about the body of knowledge that is to be learned. And the goals need to be achieved in order to master competencies. And then in order to master the goals, then you must be very specific with what the students will be able to do, their performance at the end of the learning session. And these are known as objectives. They've been called educational objectives, instructional objectives, learning objectives. We usually just call them objectives once we've set the stage. And these are the specific means by which the students will achieve the goals and ultimately the competencies. And competencies and goals are relatively long-term in nature. Competencies are throughout the entire medical school time period, which in the United States is 4 years. Goals are usually for either a course or a segment, say of 8 or 10 hours on a given topic, whereas objectives are very specific, and there may be 5 or 6 or more learning objectives for a given classroom session. So just to give you examples, the competencies that the Association of American Medical Colleges are putting forth include things like medical knowledge, things like professionalism, systems-based practice, professionalism, which I've already mentioned, patient care. So those are very broad competencies. And medical knowledge is an example of one. An example of a goal would be to provide a foundation for understanding the process of inflammation, both as a protective response and as a cause of injury and disease. So this would be an overarching goal for a learning segment on inflammation, which might, in our institution, is done over about a week's time. And then within these goals, there will be a series of objectives, and one of the objectives for inflammation, first of all, it says upon completion of the small group session, or whatever session you want to talk about, and this kind of defines when the learner will be mastering this objective, and then the learner will be able to, that tells you who the individual is, more specific than these, describe the 5 cardinal signs of inflammation, and describe them how, in terms of pathogenesis and underlying morphologic changes. And once the student has heard a lecture on these cardinal signs or read Robbins, they know exactly what you want them to master. And so a series of objectives will achieve a goal, and over the course of 4 years, mastering all the goals will achieve the competencies necessary for graduation. That's kind of where everything fits in. Now, what is the utility of objectives? Communication of course expectations. And now, part of that is to the students, of course. Let the students know what you want them to do. Usually, objectives is my one-word answer when the students say, what's going to be on the test? I just say, the objectives. I guess that's 2 words, rather than telling you all the test questions. But also, it's a communication to the faculty as to what is expected of the students so that they know what to teach. So the objectives are frequently formulated by a course director and then given to the faculty member who may work on them with the course director. And then the administration, of course, wants to know what's going on in the course, and again, we just do that by means of the objectives. Now, it's also a basis for performance standards. We base our exams on the objectives. So the objectives form the basis of the exams. And of course, the results of those exams and other evaluations provide a basis for identifying students either who qualify for advanced standing or who need remediation. So these are the basis, the objectives are the basis of the exams by which we stratify the students. They're also useful as a guide or a learning instrument for the students planning their study and review. And our students are, at Illinois, are probably more diligent than other places I've been on doing this, and they're quite successful. And then when you've got either a new PATH program or you move into interdisciplinary teaching, which we're well into, to identify the pathology segment. There's been a lot of talk at this conference about preserving pathology's identity in an integrated curriculum. This is one way to do it. There should be objectives for an entire integrated segment, and a number of those objectives need to be pathology objectives, and that is how you define what the pathology is and also protect pathology's turf. And also to improve the quality of teaching. Objectives kind of urge the faculty to think about what they want to teach. Don't be too superficial, don't be too deep, and also to be consistent with one another. In other words, the 2 faculty members are talking on different aspects of the same system. They want to know what one another are teaching so that they don't contradict each other, so they're not too redundant, and things such along those lines. Now, before we go right into drafting objectives, there are 3 domains of educational activity that a lot of experts have identified. And those include the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. And they're identified here. Mental skills, knowledge is the cognitive domain. Affective, feelings, beliefs, and attitudes, and psychomotor is manual or physical skills. And pathology courses are mainly concerned with the cognitive domain. We want the students to have knowledge of disease that will enable them to then go on to the clinical areas where they will be involved fairly heavily in these domains. However, there are ways of acquiring some skills in these domains in a pathology course as well. Now, within a given domain, and we'll stick to the cognitive domain at this point, we have Benjamin Bloom back in the 50s devised known as learning taxonomies. And these are basically levels of cognition in this case. Simply knowledge is the least sophisticated. And then you go from there by comprehension. You understand the knowledge, you apply the knowledge, you analyze new ways to use the knowledge, synthesize different areas of knowledge, and then finally evaluate the various constructs that you come up with And a way to do that, or to know how to do that, is by looking at some of these areas of achievement for each of these levels in the taxonomy. Knowledge is simply retention, and recall. Comprehension is understanding. These two together are the foundation for what's called higher order thinking, which are these levels. These are the lower order levels. So using knowledge in new situations is application, breaking things down. Critical thinking is analysis. Critical thinking, of course, is a very big word in medical education now, because students tend to believe almost anything anybody says, like Wikipedia or whatever. They need to critically think about their sources and then put things together. It's impossible to teach everything simultaneously in a nanosecond, so they need to be able to synthesize different aspects of the curriculum and then judge and evaluate the things that they're learning, this highest level of taxonomy. So to create objectives in pathology, and again we'll concentrate on the cognitive domain, these are those achievements that we just mentioned. And in creating objectives, what you want to do is create objectives that demonstrate mastery of these situations to both the learner and the instructor. In other words, what the student is able to do. And we need to demonstrate the mastery to the instructor so that the instructor can evaluate the student. So again, our evaluation, our modes of evaluation are based on our objectives. And so, as kind of a framework, we usually begin with, upon completion of the session, the segment, either objective for a course, the student will be able to do something. And you use a verb that requires the learner to perform an action that can be observed. And I'll get into more details in that in a minute. But it has to be an active verb, feedback here, that the student is able to, so the student is able to demonstrate their mastery of the objective to the instructor. And if the verb doesn't do that, then that verb should be avoided. And so, be a little more specific. Objectives need to be specific and measurable. So the verbs have to be clear and not open to interpretation, so that the student and instructor are both on the same page. The student knows what to do, the instructor knows what the student is supposed to be able to do without any real question. So they have to be specific, and verbs need to describe a measurable action. Again, something that the student can actually see themselves doing, practice doing, something that the instructor will be able to evaluate the student as far as their ability to master the particular objective. And these are some of the verbs that are used. And the objectives I've seen so far in this presentation have all been well constructed in my opinion, so maybe you don't need this talk, but in any event, I've seen a lot of these verbs used. State, list, compare, contrast, you can read them yourselves. Describe, discuss, explain, identify. Calculate, analyze. This is getting into some of the higher taxonomies. But all these things can be demonstrated to an instructor, either verbally or in written form, on an exam, etc. So these are specific measurable verbs. Now, you need to avoid, and usually people beginning to write objectives use a lot of these words, but you need to get away from them as quickly as you can. Verbs as comprehend, know is a big one. Remember, recognize, be aware of. I mean, the student may know that they have done this, but they're all mental activities which are not demonstrable to the instructor. So that's how or that's the way to avoid using the wrong type of verb is to avoid using anything that's not demonstrable to the instructor. So I'll simply end with a few examples, leave some time for questions, of well-written and not so well-written objectives. Okay, this is an objective that you may see. I've written things like this myself when I was starting out. Understand cell and tissue adaptation, reversible cell injury, irreversible cell injury. If I was a student, I'd say, okay, when, on the basis of what criteria? A well-written objective first describes something that kind of goes without saying, who is supposed to master cell injury? The student. So the student will be able to master this topic once they have completed whatever session you're talking about. This could be a lecture, this could be a small group activity, this could be reading a section in the Robbins textbook, but in any event, the student knows when and on the basis of what references they need to accomplish the task. And then the task isn't just understanding these processes, it's comparing and contrasting cell adaptation, reversible cell injury, and irreversible cell injury or cell death. They have some things in common, they have some differences among them, so compare and contrast. And compare and contrast how? On the basis of what? On the basis of morphological appearance, gross, light, microscopic, and ultrastructural. And you may have another session with a clinician, and the objective will be compare and contrast these on the basis of clinical signs and symptoms. And if you have an integrated curriculum, it is really mandatory that the different disciplines, the members of different disciplines get together and compare what they are doing is what we say. I want to see what you're doing. I'll show you what I'm doing. Best way to do that is compare and contrast your objectives and make sure that you're complete without redundancy and without contradiction, or without excessive redundancy. Because repetition for the sake of emphasis is not redundancy. That's one of the arguments. Here's another example. Know the differences among the different types of inflammation. Know. To what extent, to what depth. I'm going to demonstrate which differences, which different types of inflammation. So a well-written objective, again, upon completion of the session, the student will be able to, again, I apologize for using the same verb again, compare and contrast. Personally, I really like this combination of verbs. It is one of the higher order taxonomic verbs, and also is extremely useful when we're studying multiple processes. Compare and contrast acute, chronic, and granulomatous inflammation. Oh, that's what the different types of inflammation are. And comparing them in terms of all these aspects, etiology, pathogenesis, appearance, laboratory findings, relative time course outcomes, systemic effects, and again, depending on how well integrated your course is, you might have clinical signs and symptoms that adhere or leave that to the clinician. But this is a very specific task. this is what the student's supposed to do, compare and contrast. This is exactly what he's supposed to compare and contrast, or she, and this is exactly the basis upon which that needs to be done in order to successfully master this particular objective. And just one more, be aware of the different aspects of the biology of college and recall the issues in which the different types of college are located. Okay, be aware. Okay, I'm a student. I know a little bit about college, and we've got hydroxyproline in there. And college races break it down. But exactly what about that do they want me to know? Recall the tissues in which the different types of college are located. My first reaction is, oh my gosh, there's 28 or more kinds of colleges? Do I have to know all those? Well, the well-written objective will help the student. Again, upon completion of the session, so the educational activity, which they have to complete in order to master the objectives, we'll be able to discuss the basic aspects of college in synthesis, degradation, and function. I will say one can be a little more specific than this, but at least these three statements are significantly more specific than biology of college, and state the tissues in which collagen types 1 through 4 are predominantly located. Oh boy, I'm glad about that. 1 through 4, that's not bad. 28 is ridiculous. So, objectives not only specify what the student needs to know, what in our curriculum, the second year medical student needs to know, but also puts limits on what we expect at this time. We don't expect them, as it was very eloquently said previously in the meeting, we don't expect preclinical medical students to become diagnostic pathologists. We want them to use the pathology to understand the diseases that they will be seeing and treating. So just in conclusion, there are a variety of ways that well-constructed objectives are useful to students and to faculty. If I assign a new lecture to a faculty member, the first thing I'll do is send them the existing objectives and say, this is what we've been doing. If you want to modify them, go ahead, just let me know. We may work on them together. But the objectives really get either a new faculty member or a faculty member who is taking on a new session. It really gives them a basis on which to build their teaching session. If you understand the three domains of educational activity, the cognitive, the affective, the psychomotor, it greatly enhances the ability of an educator to construct objectives, and also the differences between higher and lower order cognitive activity is also important. Again, when we're talking about cognitive objectives. And probably the most important statement is that they must be both specific and measurable, and you accomplish this by the use of the proper verbs. And that is a sunset in Arizona, which is one of the states for anyone who's ever been in the U.S. It's one of the first states I put it near the top, added to the top of the list. So is it time for questions now, or is that going to be